Joss, the driver of the rear car, never thought this initiation would go down like this. He figured they made him drive because he would be the first guy shot at if shit went wrong. But this was something else entirely. Regardless, he leaned out his window, holding his smoking Glock after firing his expensive armor-piercing round. The pricey bullets were used only on special occasions, which this had just become. Joss figured the bullet had hit the 4-foot-wide ass 15 feet away, but he didn't think this thing would disintegrate, and yet after a yelp from the monster, the thing disappeared. A lanky Latino with a gold front tooth, Joss looked around at his passengers to find the same bewildered look on their faces as he had on his own. Joss started the car, more than happy to leave the knights past in the front car to fend for themselves. He started to pull away, but an annoying fly was buzzing his face. He stopped to swat it away. He raised his hand only to have the fly's head instantly sprout into that of a rattlesnake. Sharp fangs bit into his right hand, sending searing, agonizing venom pulsing through Joss's veins. He found his suddenly paralyzed body, dragged out of the seat, and dumped onto the ground. All he could move was his eyes as the back of his head lay in the mud, his lungs struggling for shallow breaths. Joss found himself ignored for the time being as the creature became a foot-long octopus. He saw it only as it pulled its gelatinous body onto the rear driver's side door and flattened and camouflaged itself so completely as to be imperceptible. It even took on the texture of the door's uneven rust spots. Joss's understandably wary cohort, Tyrese, on the rear driver's side, scoured his field of vision for the suddenly missing attacker. Tentatively, he reached down and touched the rust spot, seemingly relieved to find the raised stain dry and coarse. Joss feebly tried to croak out a warning to Tyrese as he opened his door. His first step outside resulted in an immediate and savage bite from the sharp beak of the octopus. Tyrese stumbled and fell, oblivion taking him a moment after his face evinced his shock. Will, the scruffy white gangbanger who had been sitting to Tyrese's right, stumbled out his door, even as he was transfixed by the attack unfolding on the other side of the car. He didn't notice that the creature was draped over his side of the car as well. As the creature had unveiled his octopus form to bite Tyrese, he had draped an extended tentacle over the car that then forked out into 100 willowy tendrils of a Portuguese man-o'-war. Will ran through the poisonous gauntlet, his eyes focused away from the threat until it was too late. He fell onto the street on the other side of the car. The creature now appeared wholly as a grizzly bear in the back seat. The front passenger, James, turned to shoot the bear, but it threw its now massive bulk into the back of the seat, crunching it forward and pinning the muscular man against the dashboard, his arm contorting upward as bullets went up through the roof. The bear reached his huge head around with a roar, then quickly bit James on the shoulder, sending paralyzing venom from the snake fangs in its ursine mouth. Joss saw that James was already slumping into the dashboard as the bear morphed back into human form and walked calmly around to him. He was still paralyzed from the neck down, barely able to breathe. Joss was now looking into the face of a slender, biracial young man who wore a navy blue golf shirt and khakis. The young man crouched over him and pulled his wallet out of his pants. He leafed through it briefly and then put it back. "Hello, Joss," the man said calmly. "I've injected you with a neurotoxin, but you probably guessed that by now. I also injected everyone but you and the other driver with a large dose of gabapentin that my body synthesized, an analgesic that will interfere with their short-term memory formation. I'm going to ask you some yes or no questions. You won't be able to speak for a while, so I'd like you to blink twice for yes and once for no. Do you understand?" Joss blinked twice. "I'm very upset that you came here and tried to kill me. Are you going to come here again?" Joss blinked once, strenuously. "I'm glad to hear that. But now I have to ask you another question. Are you a good advocate?" Joss darted his eyes back and forth, unsure of the right answer. "I don't mean to ask a trick question. You see, my fear is that regardless of your intentions, your friends are going to want to return here and finish me off. I need to know if you can convince them that is a bad idea." Joss double-blinked furiously. "I'm glad. Still, in all, I wonder if you could use a little help." As the young man said this, his right index finger began to elongate then coil up on itself like the proboscis of a butterfly. The digit uncoiled its tip, turning a little saggy and translucent. A moment later, the fingertip became fetid, stringy ooze. embedded with small white eggs. The young man pried open Joss's mouth with his other hand. "Have you ever heard of parasitic wasps, Joss?" The terrified thug blinked once. "You never studied them in school?" One blink again. "That makes two of us. I'm sorry to hear you never heard about them, though. They're quite interesting." The floppy column of white slime entered Joss's open mouth, hanging precipitously over his esophagus. You see, parasitic wasps take an interesting tack to the age-old problem of how to feed their young. They can't just drag a dead carcass into their nest. Their larvae eat live flesh. And you know babies, they're always hungry. As Joel said this, a couple of the ensconced eggs hatched, and frenzied worm-like larvae emerged, waving their slick, striated bodies back and forth as they struggled frantically to reach Joss's throat. So what parasitic wasps do is they paralyze their prey and then insert their eggs inside of them. When the eggs hatch, the larvae eat the victim from the inside out. It's very unpleasant. The proboscis stiffened as it was shoved even more deeply down Joss's throat. That's why I'm asking, are you a good advocate? Joss blinked twice in frequent, intense bursts. I hope so. But I'm wondering if it would just be easier to plant these eggs inside of you. They would make a strong argument not to return all on their own. When the wasps came crawling out of your flesh, that is. Hopefully you would still be alive to explain how they got there. Do you think I need to plant them? Joss blinked once. The young man pondered for an agonizing minute, and then said, "Okay." With that, he pulled the proboscis slowly out of Joss's throat. A drop of viscous fluid fell onto Joss's lips. The young man scooped a determined, wriggling larva a moment before it would have fallen to the back of Joss's throat. "Sorry about that," the young man said as the bug merged into his flesh. He got up and walked toward the other driver.